The distress beacon had been screaming for 6 hours before anyone answered it. Lieutenant Kyle Mercer was elbow-deep in the guts of a broken atmospheric recycler when the alarm hit. Not the gentle chime of a routine alert. The kind of alarm that meant something had gone wrong on a molecular level, somewhere in the dark between stars. He pulled his arm free, wiped coolant off his face with the back of his hand, and ran. The colony ship Arden's Wake was not a warship. It was a slow, graceless hauler, carrying 412 settlers toward a planet called Caro Prime, a world no human had ever touched. Kyle was the ship's chief engineer, not a soldier, not a hero. He was a 31-year-old man from Dayton, Ohio, who was good at fixing things and bad at sleeping. The bridge was already loud when he arrived. The Captain Donna Reyes had both hands on the console and her jaw set like concrete. Beside her, Navigation Officer Pete Huang was pulling up the beacon's origin coordinates with shaking fingers. "What are we looking at?" Kyle said. "Escape pod," Pete said. "Small one. Design doesn't match anything in our database." Kyle leaned over the display. The pod was tumbling slowly, venting gas from 2 ruptures along its hull. Whoever was inside had maybe 4 hours of air left, maybe less. "Life signs?" Donna asked. "One," Pete said. "Faint, but it's there." Donna looked at Kyle. Kyle looked at the pod. Then he looked back at Donna. "I'll get the docking arm ready," he said. It took 40 minutes to match velocity with the tumbling pod. Kyle ran the docking arm himself, which nobody argued with because Kyle had a kind of mechanical intuition that bordered on unfair. He could feel the arm through the controls the way a surgeon feels a scalpel. He matched the pod's slow spin, locked the magnetic clamps, and pulled it in like something delicate. The decompression chamber hissed. Kyle stood at the inner door with the ship's doctor, a compact, serious woman named Grace Olson, who was already holding a portable scanner. "Whatever's in there," Grace said, "might not respond to human medical treatment." "Noted," Kyle said. The pod door opened inward. A smell hit them first, something sharp and mineral, like copper and rain at the same time. Grace stepped forward with her scanner. Kyle stepped forward because that was what he did. He stepped toward broken things. What was inside the pod was not human. She was roughly humanoid, which was the first thing Kyle registered. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head. But the proportions were different. She was tall, taller than Kyle, with limbs that were slightly too long, giving her a stretched, elegant quality even while she was slumped unconscious against the pod's inner wall. Her skin was pale gray-blue, the color of early morning sky just before the sun commits to rising. Her hair was white. Not the white of age, but the white of something that had never been another color, and it spread around her in the low gravity like something alive. Her face, from what Kyle could see past the oxygen mask she'd managed to fit herself with before losing consciousness, was sharp-featured and angular, with high cheekbones and brows that curved in a way that suggested strong emotion even in unconsciousness. Grace was already scanning. She's alive. Blood pressure is low but stable. She's got 3 cracked ribs and a deep laceration on her left forearm. Whatever hit her pod hit it hard. Kyle crouched down to her level, which was instinct. His hands went to her shoulders to check if anything was dislocated. Professional. Clinical. Her eyes opened. They were gold. Not amber, not hazel. Gold with pupils that were vertical slits that widened the moment they met his eyes, expanding from a thin line to something enormous, the way a cat's eyes open in the dark. Kyle did not move. She did not move. 3 seconds passed that felt like a structural assessment of the entire universe. Then she said something. It was not English. It was nothing like English. It was a series of sounds that had edges to them, consonants that clicked and vowels that slid. And it came out of her in a rush, urgent, her hand coming up and gripping Kyle's wrist before he could think to step back. Her grip was strong, not painful, but definite. She was not asking permission. "Easy," Kyle said, because it was the only thing he had. "You're safe. You're on a human ship. We're not going to hurt you." She stared at him. Her gold eyes moved over his face with an intensity that felt like being read. Then, slowly, with the careful precision of someone repeating a phrase they'd practiced but never used, she said one word in something approximating English. "Alive?" Kyle nodded. Alive. Her grip on his wrist did not loosen. Grace finished her scan. "We need to get her to the med bay. Kyle, can you help me move her? She's too tall for the standard gurney to be comfortable." Kyle spent the next 2 hours in the med bay, helping Grace stabilize their guest. The alien woman, who was conscious and watching everything with those gold eyes, allowed herself to be treated without protest, though every time Kyle stepped out of her line of sight, she turned her head to find him again. Grace noticed. Grace noticed everything. "She's tracking you specifically," Grace said quietly, while rebandaging the forearm. "Maybe I was just the first face she saw," Kyle said. Grace said nothing, which was sometimes her way of saying she disagreed. The woman's translator module, a small device embedded behind her left ear, was damaged but functional. By the end of the second hour, it had processed enough ambient conversation to begin offering fragmented translations. She told them her name was Viereth, though she indicated the full name was much longer and the translator was simplifying. She was from a species called the Kelvi. She had been a scout pilot. Her ship had been destroyed by pirates 3 days ago. She was the only survivor. She said this last part without a change in expression. Kyle watched her say it and thought about what it cost to say something like that without flinching. When he stood to leave the medbay that night, giving her space, giving himself space. She said his name. She had learned it from overhearing Grace use it. She said it with that sharp Kelvi pronunciation that put a slight click before the first syllable. "Kyle," she said, "you fixed my arrival." He turned. "You fixed the arm that caught my pod," she said. "I watched through the porthole. You ran the arm yourself." He didn't know what to do with the way she was looking at him. It was the look of someone performing a calculation and finding the answer surprising. "It's what I do," he said. "I fix things." Vareth considered this for a long moment with those wide gold eyes. "Yes," she said. "I can see that." Kyle left the medbay. He stood in the corridor for a moment, his hand still warm from where she'd gripped his wrist. Then he went back to the recycler, because things were still broken, and that was something he understood. The translator was working better by morning. Vareth sat up in the medbay cot, with her long legs crossed under her and her white hair pulled back. And when Kyle came in to check on a fluid line that Grace had flagged as running too cold, Vareth turned to him and said, more clearly and completely, "Explain to me why you have that." She was pointing at the tool roll tucked under his arm. It was canvas, oil-stained, stuffed with wrenches and picks and a voltage probe that had survived 3 ships and 2 planetary deployments. It had been with him longer than any relationship he'd ever had. "Tools," he said, "for fixing things. You carry them everywhere?" "Most places." She tilted her head. The motion was distinctly non-human, about 30 degrees further than a human neck usually allowed. "Among the Kelvi, only a senior architect carries tools personally. Tools are for specialists who have proven themselves essential to the ship's survival." Kyle looked at his tool roll. I'm the chief engineer. If something breaks, I fix it. So you have proven yourself essential. I've proven myself useful, he said. That's different. Virith's pupils widened slightly. Is it? Kyle opened the panel he'd come to check and started working. Virith watched him the way he'd seen people watch a skilled card dealer, tracking every motion with attention that was not quite casual. Your ship is unusual, she said after a while. She's a hauler, not exactly built for excitement. No, that is not what I mean. Virith paused, choosing words carefully through the translator. The Kelvi ships are stratified. Rank determines location. The higher your position, the higher your deck. Engineers are below the waterline, as you would say. They are not seen. Kyle tightened a coupler. I spend half my time down in the lower decks, while other half I'm wherever something needs looking at. The captain permits this? Donna doesn't care where I am, as long as the ship stays flying. Virith was quiet for a moment. She trusts you completely. She trusts the work, Kyle said. That's enough. Something in Virith's expression shifted. It was subtle, and Kyle almost missed it. A slight tension at the corners of her eyes, the pupils thinning and then expanding again. Among my people, she said carefully, trust is given only after bond testing. Years of shared trial. It is not something offered quickly. Kyle finished with the coupler and moved to the next check. Humans are a little looser about it. Probably reckless if you asked a Kelvi. Perhaps, Virith said. Or perhaps it is efficient. Captain Donna Reyes met Kyle in the corridor outside the medbay that afternoon. Donna was 52, built like someone who had spent decades not having time to be anything other than direct. And she had a way of looking at people that made them feel like a system she was running diagnostics on. How's our guest? She said. Stable, sharp, her translator is almost fully calibrated. What do we know about the pirates that hit her ship? Nothing specific yet. She'll talk about it more when she's ready. Donna nodded slowly. I sent a signal to the Kelvi diplomatic frequency we have on record. Old one, from the Caro Prime briefing documents, may be outdated. You think they'll respond? I think if they find out one of their scouts is alive on a human hauler, they'll respond fast. Donna looked at him. How are you doing with all this? Kyle shrugged. She's a person. She's hurt and she's alone, and she's dealing with losing her whole crew. That part I understand fine. Donna's diagnostics look intensified. Kyle, Donna, you know I need you functional. I'm functional. You were in the med bay for 4 hours this morning. The fluid line was running cold. Donna stared at him for one long second. Then she walked away, which was also sometimes her way of having the last word. Virith was standing when Kyle returned, which Grace had said she should not be doing yet, standing at the small porthole in the medbay wall with her arms crossed and her forehead almost touching the glass. Beyond the glass was nothing but stars. Kyle stopped in the doorway. She didn't turn, but she said, I can feel you standing there. Kelvi have better hearing than humans. Sorry, he said. Do not be. I prefer company to silence right now. She pressed her fingers against the glass. I keep counting the stars and expecting to find the ones I know. But the constellations here are completely different. I am very far from anything familiar. Kyle crossed the room and stood beside her at the porthole. Not close, a respectful distance. He looked out at the same dark. There's a trick I learned, he said. Find one star, just one, doesn't matter which. Pick it and give it a name you know. Something from home. Vareth turned slightly to look at him. And this helps? It makes the space smaller, he said. One familiar thing. That's all you need to stop the vertigo. She turned back to the stars. Her gold eyes moved slowly across the field of light. Then she stopped. That one, she said. She pointed to a mid-brightness star near the upper corner of the porthole. I am calling it Denvi. It is what we call the first star a Kelvi child learns to identify. The anchor star. Good choice, Kyle said. They stood together at the porthole for a while, not speaking. The ship hummed around them, the low-frequency hum of engines that Kyle could read like a language. The vibration of a functioning system, the sound of nothing broken. Vareth said quietly, You did not have to come back this evening. I know. Why did you? Kyle thought about the honest answer. The honest answer was that the medbay was where something was happening that he didn't have a name for yet, and that he was the kind of person who moved toward things he didn't have names for, because naming them required proximity. The fluid line, he said. I wanted to check it ran warm overnight. Vareth looked at him. Her pupils were very wide. Of course, she said. She was not talking about the fluid line. Neither was he. 3 days into Vareth's recovery, the Kelvi signal arrived. It was not a response to Donna's diplomatic ping. It was a military frequency, tight band and encrypted, and it came from a ship that the Arden's Wake's passive sensors identified as approximately 6 times the hauler's mass. Grace was the one who came to find Kyle, because Kyle was the one Vareth had asked for. She wants you in the bridge meeting, Grace said. Specifically you. Kyle put down his diagnostic tablet. Why me specifically? Grace gave him the look that said she knew exactly why and was choosing not to say it. The bridge meeting was Kyle, Donna, Pete, Grace, and Vareth, who stood at the center of the room with her arms loose at her sides and her white hair unbound. She had declined the standard-issue coveralls and was wearing the Kelvi flight suit she'd arrived in, patched at the shoulder where Grace had treated the wound. She looked, Kyle thought, like someone who had remembered who they were. The encrypted signal decoded through Vareth's translator module. The voice was male, older, authoritative, with the clicking Kelvi consonants crisp and precise. Vareth translated in real time. That is Sub-Commander Elvan. He is the second officer of the patrol ship, now holding position 20,000 kilometers off your port side. She paused. He is asking me to confirm that I am unharmed and that the humans who found me are not a threat. What do you want to tell him? Donna said. Vareth looked at Kyle for exactly 1 second. 1. Then back to Donna. I want to tell him the truth, she said. She spoke into the channel. A long response, many syllables, the translator only catching fragments. Kyle heard his name in it, rendered in that Kelvi pronunciation with a small click before the first syllable. The response from Elvan was shorter. A question, tone clearly surprised. Vareth responded. Her voice was level, but her hands, Kyle noticed, were not entirely still. The channel went quiet for 30 seconds. Then Elvan spoke again. Marf Vareth translated. He says the Kelvi patrol ship will escort the Arden's Wake to Caro Prime. He says it is an honor gesture, recognizing that this crew preserved the life of a Kelvi scout. She paused. He also says that Sub-Commander Elvan extends personal gratitude to the engineer who caught the pod. Pete looked at Kyle. Grace looked at Kyle. Donna looked somewhere else with a completely neutral expression that cost her visible effort. Kyle said, Tell him we're glad she's alive. Vareth translated. Another short response from Elvan. Vireth's expression did something complicated. What did he say? Kyle asked. He said, Vireth translated with deliberate care, that he will note in the ship's record that she is alive because an Earthling ran the docking arm himself. The channel closed. Donna immediately started coordinating with Pete on the escort formation. The room got busy. Kyle stayed put. Vireth crossed to him. She stood closer than she usually did, not the careful, respectful distance she'd maintained in the med bay. Closer. He had to look up slightly, because she was taller, and she looked down at him with those gold eyes and pupils that were very wide. I told Elvan something else, she said. Something I did not translate for the room. Kyle waited. I told him I would be requesting a delay to my return assignment. She held his gaze. I told him there are things on this ship I have not yet finished understanding. The bridge hum was very loud in Kyle's ears. Or maybe it wasn't loud at all, and his blood pressure was compensating. Is that true? He said. I have never told Elvan anything that was not true, she said. She went back to watching the star chart with Pete, asking questions about Caro Prime in that careful, calibrated translator voice, completely composed. Kyle stood very still for a moment. Then he went to fix a pressure seal on Deck 4, because something was always broken, and because he needed to be somewhere the hum of working machinery could organize his thoughts. It didn't work as well as usual. The pirates found them 2 days out from Caro Prime. They came in fast, and they came in 3 ships, which was the oldest trick in the ambush playbook. 1 ship visible on the long-range scan, 2 more hidden in the sensor shadow of a debris field from some ancient collision that had left a broad arc of rock and ice between the stars. Kyle was asleep when the alarm hit. He was awake and moving in under 4 seconds, which was a skill developed over years of emergencies that did not care what time it was. The ship was already shaking by the time he reached engineering. They're using mass drivers. Pete's voice came through the intercom, high and tight. Not energy weapons, physical projectiles, so our deflector screens aren't doing much. Kyle was already running diagnostics. The Arden's wake was a hauler. She had no weapons. She had thick cargo hull plating and a maneuvering system designed for slow approach to orbital docks, not evasion. She had Kyle. Pete, Kyle said into the intercom, I'm going to give you a 30-second burst of reserve thrust from the secondary engines. We haven't used them since the last port call, and they'll complain, but they'll work. It's use it to slide behind the HFY ship. The HFY ship is firing back, Pete said. It's a lot of fire. Then let them do their job while we stay out of the way. Kyle was already rerouting power. Donna, I'm pulling from life support reserves temporarily. Everyone will be breathing a little thin for about 4 minutes. Donna's voice came back calm. Do it. Kyle did it. The next 20 minutes were the most precise and worst engineering Kyle had done in his career. The reserve engines fired on time and screamed the whole way, vibrating in frequencies that Kyle felt in his back teeth. He kept the power reroutes moving, stealing from non-essential systems and feeding them to hull integrity and maneuverability, giving Pete every half degree of motion the ship had available. The HFY patrol ship fought like something that had been waiting for the chance. Kyle could track it on the sensors, 3 times faster than the pirates, moving with a precision that was almost personal. Vireth appeared in engineering 14 minutes in. Kyle did not have time to ask how she'd gotten there or why. She appeared beside his primary console and looked at the readouts with an expression of complete focused attention. What do you need? She said. Do you know anything about mass driver trajectories? I can calculate intercept probabilities, she said. I was a scout pilot. Trajectory math is basic. Tell me which of the incoming shots Pete needs to dodge and which will miss on their own, Kyle said. I'll relay to the bridge. For the next 6 minutes, Vareth stood at his shoulder, calling trajectory probabilities in that clear, precise voice. And Kyle relayed them, and Pete moved the ship, and 3 times it mattered enormously. Then the Kelvi patrol ship finished what it had started, and the sensors went quiet. The 3 pirate ships were disabled, not destroyed. Kyle noted that. The Kelvi were deliberate. Engineering was very quiet. Kyle realized he was gripping the console edge hard enough that his knuckles had gone pale. He let go. He turned. Vareth was 3 feet away, still looking at the sensor display, her jaw set, her white hair loose from the tie she'd had it in. There was a smudge of hydraulic fluid on her left forearm, probably from where she'd braced against a pipe during the shaking. You're good at that, Kyle said. Trajectory mathematics? Staying calm when things are breaking. Vareth looked at him. I was not calm. I was busy. Those are different things. Kyle laughed. It came out before he could do anything about it, short and genuine. Vareth stared at him. I am unfamiliar with that response in this context, she said. It's called laughing, Kyle said. It's what humans do when something is both terrible and somehow accurate. Vareth considered this at length. It seemed accurate. It was, Kyle said. She held his gaze for a long moment, and then looked back at the sensors. But something in her posture was different. Looser. Like a system that had been running at high tension and had just recalibrated. Kyle, she said. Yeah. The thing you said about finding one star, giving it a name. I remember. I have been thinking about it. She was quiet for a moment. I think you are the kind of person who finds the one thing worth naming and then names it correctly, even when everything else is broken and dark. The engineering hum was very loud. I'm the kind of person who fixes things, Kyle said. Yes, said Vareth. That is exactly what I mean. Kyle looked at her for a long time and did not say anything else, because some things didn't need fixing, they just needed to be looked at directly without flinching. The Arden's wake broke atmosphere over Caro Prime at dawn local time. Kyle watched it from the engineering observation port, which was a small scratched window that faced downward during descent, giving a view of clouds parting like something making way. The planet was green and gray-blue and enormous, and Kyle pressed his palm against the cold glass and the way he always did during first descent on a new world. A habit he developed at 23 on his first posting and never broken. Vareth found him there. She had a Kelvi data tablet in her hand and the expression of someone who had been having a conversation with themselves and had reached a conclusion they weren't entirely sure about. The Kelvi consulate on Caro Prime has confirmed a diplomatic meeting with Captain Reyes, she said. Sub-Commander Elvan will represent the patrol ship. I will attend as translator and witness. That's good, Kyle said. Good for the settlers. Yes. Vareth stood beside him at the observation port. She looked down at the planet. It will also determine my reassignment timeline. Kyle kept his eyes on the clouds. What are the options? I can return to the Kelvi home system for debriefing and reassignment to a new scout posting. She paused. Or I can request an extended exchange posting. There is a diplomatic precedent, rarely used. A Kelvi officer embedded with a non-Kelvi crew for the purpose of cultural understanding and intelligence exchange. Kyle said nothing. The posting requires a sponsor, Vareth said. A member of the receiving crew who vouches for the exchange, who is willing to be formally responsible for the embedded officer's integration. A long silence. The clouds below them thinned, and the surface of Caro Prime began to show through. A wide flat plain near the designated landing zone, green and untouched. The Arden's Wake is a hauler, Kyle said. We're not exactly a prestigious posting for a Kelvi scout. No, Vireth agreed. We break down constantly. I spend half my life in access tunnels. I noticed, she said. Donna runs a loose ship. Anyone can be anywhere. Engineers eat in the captain's mess if they want. That also, Vireth said carefully, is not a disadvantage. Kyle finally turned from the window and looked at her directly. She met his eyes. Her pupils were fully wide, which he had come to understand was not a stress response. It was the opposite. I don't know anything about Kelvi culture, he said. I'd probably get everything wrong. You would get things wrong, she confirmed. And then you would observe the error carefully and correct for it. I have been watching you for 8 days. That is what you do. Kyle looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said. Vireth held very still. Okay is agreement? Okay is agreement, he said. Something crossed her face that he didn't have a name for yet. It was not a human expression. It was something that her species made when they felt something they had decided to stop pretending not to feel. She held out her hand, palm up, the way she'd done when she'd gripped his wrist in the pod. Except this time, it was not urgent, and it was not fear. It was something offered. Kyle put his hand in hers. Her grip was warm and specific and completely certain. Below them, Caro Prime came up to meet the ship, green and new and waiting. And Kyle thought about how every new world started the same way, with a descent through clouds and someone beside you who made the space smaller. The Arden's Wake touched down. Things were still broken, somewhere in the ship. They always were. Kyle would fix them in the morning. The diplomatic meeting lasted 6 hours and reshaped every trade and transit agreement humanity had attempted with the Kelvi for the past 40 years. Kyle was not in the meeting. He was in the Port Authority maintenance bay on Caro Prime, helping a planetary engineer named Doug Fitch diagnose a water reclamation fault that had been misclassified as electrical when it was actually a corroded pressure valve, which was obvious if you listened to the pitch of the system hum instead of just reading the error codes. Doug was grateful and also slightly baffled by Kyle's ability to hear things machines were trying to say. Vireth found him there 3 hours after the meeting ended. She came into the maintenance bay with her long stride and her white hair braided now. A new style, tighter. And Kyle had learned that when she changed her hair, it meant something had shifted internally. She was carrying 2 of the warm liquid provisions that the Caro Prime port offered to new arrivals. Small sealed containers that smelled like coffee and were absolutely not coffee. She handed one to Kyle. Sub-Commander Elvan wants to meet you. Kyle accepted the container. Me, specifically. He has been curious about you since the pod recovery. He said the docking arm maneuver was mentioned in the pirates' own sensor logs, which were recovered from the disabled ships. They noted it as an anomaly. A civilian hauler running precision catch and stabilize on a tumbling pod, manual override, no errors. Kyle drank the not coffee. It tasted like cardamom and something smoky. It's not that impressive. It's just listening to the arm. Elvan does not think it is not impressive, Vireth said. Elvan thinks you are an anomaly. Is that good or bad? Among the Kelvi, an anomaly is something worth studying. She looked at him over her own container. It is very good. Kyle thought about what it meant to be worth studying by an alien military officer and decided to file it under things that were stranger than his regular life and move on. The meeting? He said. How did it go? Virith's expression did the complicated thing again. Captain Reyes is a remarkable negotiator. She said almost nothing for the first hour and let Elvan establish every assumption he had. Then she dismantled them one at a time with questions. That sounds like Donna. Elvan did not expect it. Kelvi negotiators speak first. The one who speaks first establishes dominance of the conversation. Virith looked at her container. Donna Reyes did not speak first, and by the time she did, she had already won. So humanity has a better deal with the Kelvi now? Humanity has a substantially better deal, Virith said. Transit rights through 4 Kelvi patrol sectors. Medical technology exchange. Preliminary framework for joint response to piracy in this region. She paused. And 1 engineer's exchange posting, which Elvan noted was unprecedented, but was willing to authorize because I asked him to. Kyle looked at her. You asked him directly? I asked him directly. She held his gaze. I told him you were worth the paperwork. Kyle stood in the maintenance bay on a new planet with not coffee in his hand and an alien woman watching him with gold eyes and pupils that had not gone narrow since she'd walked in. Virith, he said. Kyle, she said. I don't know what this is. I know, she said. Neither do I. Kelvi bond formation is not rapid. It takes time and shared trial and repeated demonstration of compatibility. We've had 8 days. And a pirate attack, she said. And a trajectory calculation under fire. And 1 porthole. And 1 star that I named. She was quiet for a moment. Among my people, you demonstrate what you are through accumulated action, not declaration. Last, the Kelvi word for what I am doing right now would translate roughly as beginning to establish a ledger of evidence. Kyle thought about that. And what's the evidence so far? Virith looked at him with complete seriousness. You ran the docking arm yourself. You gave me a star. You laughed at the right moment. You did not ask me what I was when you found me in the pod. You asked if I was safe. Kyle was very still. I asked you what you needed, he said. I ask that when something is broken. Yes, said Virith. I know. She reached out and touched the tool roll tucked under his arm, her fingers pressing against the canvas for a moment, feeling the shapes of the tools inside. I am going to learn everything about this ship, she said. Every system, every access tunnel. Like I am going to understand everything you understand. That'll take a while, Kyle said. Good, said Virith. I have requested an extended posting. Kyle looked at her hand on his tool roll, then up at her face. You should know, he said carefully, that my last 3 crew postings ended because the people I worked with said I cared more about the ship than I cared about anything else. I know, Virith said. Grace told me. She also told me that the ship has never failed under your care. Not once. In 11 years. Kyle had not known Grace said that. That is not a flaw, Virith said quietly. That is a fingerprint. She pulled her hand back from the tool roll and straightened, all composed precision again, except for the pupils that were still wide. Elvan wants to meet you at the Port Authority Hall in 1 hour, she said. Wear something that is not covered in hydraulic fluid. I make no promises, Kyle said. Virith's mouth did something that was not quite a human smile, but was reaching for the same place. I know, she said. It is in the ledger. She walked out of the maintenance bay. Kyle stood with the not coffee going cool in his hand, and Doug Fitch pretending very hard to be interested in a pipe coupling 6 feet away. Not a word, Doug, Kyle said. Not a single word. Doug agreed. Kyle drained the not coffee. It had gone the temperature of something that had been warm once, and still remembered it. He picked up his tool roll, slung it under his arm, and went to meet a HFY sub-commander on a new planet at the edge of everything familiar. In the Arden's wake sat on the landing pad behind him, her hull ticking as it cooled, the sound of a ship resting between the things it was asked to carry. Kyle had fixed every broken thing she had. He thought, not for the first time, that he might be getting better at recognizing the things that didn't need fixing. They just needed someone to stay close enough to keep them running. That he had always been very good at.